Hitman Absolution came out in 2012 from IO Interactive, and it essentially kicked off where the previous one finished, but it releases on the 13th of November for Nintendo Switch 1. So we're going to go over performance, features, price, download size, all of that good stuff. And yes, I will mention if there's gyroscopic controls. I know a man who enjoys those. We'll also look at performance on the Nintendo Switch 2 if you're going to be playing it over there, frame rates, all of that good stuff, handheld, hopefully everything you'll need to know. Is it a 360 no scope, or has this one got no hope? Well, my name's Mark Walker, welcome back to SwitchUp, now let's find out. Kicking off then, in terms of options before you even begin the game, you do have the choice of XY axis customization independent of each other. You can change the amount of aim assist, as by default the auto aim is a little bit heavy. There's motion controlled aiming, which can be switched on and off, as well as a sensitivity slider, which is really nice. I'm pretty sure the first game, was it Hitman Blood Money? Not the first game, but the first one we had on Switch, that didn't have motion controls, not that I remember. So yeah, that's nice to see. You can choose to show or hide all of the hints, those that pop up on the screen, little tutorial messages and in the instinct messages. Within the graphics tab, you can change things like gamma, bloom, depth of field and film grain, but there's nothing to do with performance in here. A bit disappointing. I would have liked them to have included some form of toggle so that you can uncap the frame rates, but you never know, it might be running at 60. It's not going to be running at 60, is it? You're given 5 different difficulty modes, all the way up to purist mode, which offers no help, no guides, no interface, and only a crosshair. And that's basically it for options. You're then dropped into the game. Now, story-wise, it continues where the last game left off, almost to a fault, whereby it felt like it didn't really have much of a direction at times. But that's not really what it's about with Hitman, in my opinion. It's all about setting up fantastic locations, sandboxes, to then go around and assassinate people and try and reach these different tiers of score, which are quite difficult, with the hardest requiring you to remain a ghost. IO have made a number of tweaks to the gameplay, things like the instinct mode, the way that's highlighted to help you identify targets, the slow down time point shooting mode as well.
To deal fatal damage to all 4 enemies.
And there are 20 missions, give or take, in this one. Visually then compounded by perhaps the fact that I've come from playing the other game on Switch 2. The aliasing on objects, items, scenery, geometry is very evident. In interiors, some of the things like textures on like magazine covers are surprisingly sharp. There are some nice things here. You have the God rays where the light shines through the trees. Artistically, I've always liked the way these games look. It's just showing its age, and half of that is actually more to do with the fact that it's 12 years old. It's of its time, and that's reflected in the fact that there are no reflections on the ground. There's no real shadows cast by most items, but there is some good shadowing used that's cast onto Agent 47 himself. Also, I need to remind myself, this is a Nintendo Switch 1 game, and having things like transparency effects still there on glass surfaces, it's actually quite impressive. What I said about textures kind of carries over as well to the character models. They look quite nice. It's definitely one where its flaws are much more hidden during interior locations. They've added in gyroscopic controls as well, so you do have that to look forward to. If you're playing in handheld, it looks so crisp just by nature of shrinking everything down. The keel effect camera uses a shallow depth of field or pseudo shallow depth effect, which looks fine when it's in motion, but when it ends, it suddenly jarringly clicks back to the normal look. It's also used for other animations, and they have used a few particle effects as well, and you've got other things like butterflies flying around the environment, small particles in the air. It just is, as I said, of its time, while still doing everything that you enjoy about Hitman. Load times are also quite impressive, taking around 5 to 10 seconds when reloading, which sometimes you'll have to do if you accidentally throw a brick in the wrong place, grab a guard, knock him out right in front of the view of everyone. So that is nice to see. Now, performance when you're in these areas, as you can see from frame rates, is pretty good. The real test comes from when the engine was put to its test in Absolution in that first large area when you've got hundreds of people milling about the environments. So let's take a look at performance on Switch 1 in those areas. And we could do the exact same section using the Nintendo Switch 2 just to give you an idea of how they perform comparatively. Now here's the interesting thing. It seems to my eye that there is a performance issue on Switch 2. It looks like the compatibility layer is causing this half-second pause every few seconds. Right at the start of this scene you can see it clearly. And then when you're walking around, you almost feel it. It's like that frame pacing delay. Now with that said, and with frame rates always, I can never rule out that it's not an issue, my issue, basically. As you can see from the frame rate graphs across Switch 1 and 2, it's actually really solid, very consistently 30 FPS with 33.3 millisecond frame times. With that said though, I do trust my eyes, and it's just not quite perfect on Switch 2, with a couple of minor stutters on Switch 1. There may be some differences between image quality. I can't remember if this engine uses dynamic resolution scaling. And when we go over to handheld, things almost flip reverse. The Switch 1 is actually the one that has more stutters, and the Switch 2 a little less. It is evident in both at certain moments. It's very minor. These aren't things that are huge issues really, but the image quality of the Switch 2 version in handheld looks better to my eye. See what you think. Then you've got the sound. These games have always had a cracking soundtrack and reasonable voice acting, and I think that carries over nicely. I don't notice any massive degradation of quality. Have a listen and see what you think.
Best Chicago dog in town. Best Chicago dog in town. Best hat with mustache. Best price in town. Best.
When it comes to gameplay, they are a joy still. I know some people didn't like Absolution as much as Hitman 1 and 2. This is partly to do with the change of pace. So whereas the other games were very much a large open area, these had things like checkpoints and sometimes were a little more linear. But I actually enjoyed the fact that it segmented its sandbox sections. Sometimes just a full sandbox could be a little overwhelming, but I do understand the critique for sure. Things like that point shooting are great, and playing this with those joycons, the aiming's really quite good, which suggests that the frame pacing isn't all that bad. There's certainly so much replayability here. Each mission introduces a number of different ways to assassinate your target. Each of them is marked clearly. And I don't remember, but it feels like they've changed the selection menu. I remember on PC, I'm sure it was left to right. You're kind of sliding the items across the bottom of the screen. Or it could be that they just introduced this radial menu with the Absolution release. Hitman Absolution launches at £19.99 or your regional equivalent. As I've mentioned a couple of times, has 20 different missions, a lot of replayability. The classic contract mode isn't available at launch on the Switch version, but they have planned to release that as a free update in 2026. I'm always a little skeptical when devs say, we'll release that free of charge down the line, and then you end up with radio silence, but I think IO are generally pretty good. For £19.99, that's a lot of value. If you've not played these before, or this one specifically, you're going to enjoy it if you like the series as a whole, bar what I've mentioned about some slight pacing differences on some of the levels. Now, when Blood Money originally released on Switch, it had quite a lot of crashing issues, and I would say more performance problems than this. This looks like a more refined version. Perhaps they've been able to carry over the experience from the first game they put out. Still, there are the occasional minor stutters and bugs. It still gets a very respectable SwitchUp score of 80%. Let me know in the comments, is this a game you are considering picking up? Have you already got the first one? I would love to see like a box set, once they've finished releasing all these older games, like a proper physical with all of them in together and some extra bits and bobs. I'd be all over that for sure. If you've got any other questions, I'm sure I've missed something along the lines, just let me know down in the comments and I'll try and reply as soon as possible. Thank you to our Patreons, our members, to the developer and publisher for the review copy. For all things Switch, all the time, keep it Switch up. Cheers guys. See ya!